3, 2, 1.
Hi, my name is Edgar Costilla. I am 34 years old, and this is my experience story.
Stories. Some may be too taboo, too scary, too weird, too extreme, too violent. We are afraid of what people may say, what they may do, what they may think. But we all have a story to tell. This is my experience. Directed by Emmanuel Vasquez.
Edgar Costilla has taken a long path to earning his high school education. For many years, he put his job before his education. It was work that drew Edgar away from finishing high school years ago.
When the time came to where I had to decide whether it was a job or school, it was always the job first those times, and this time I chose school.
Before pursuing his education, his situation was intense.
Alcoholism and drug abuse led to a psychotic break.
So I experienced an episode that happened to me 5 years ago that kind of took me out of reality. So I'm going to kind of begin at the start of when this episode happened to me that kind of took me out of touch with reality. It gave me a little bit of insight on how people view the world. I'm going to go back a few years ago. I was 30 years old. I experienced my first psychotic episode. Basically, I was at a time in my life where I was smoking marijuana. It was not something that I would normally do, but it kind of led me down to a path where I experienced something that kind of took me to a different place. I know marijuana affects people in different ways, but in my case, it took me somewhere that wouldn't normally happen to an average person. So back in the year of 2014, right when I was at the cusp of getting my life together a little bit, I had an episode that happened to me. I had my first psychotic episode. It took me out of touch with reality. It was just an average normal day where I was smoking the marijuana. People would say that marijuana is kind of an enjoyment, a relaxation, so it relaxed me. It was something that kind of alleviates a lot of stress, and which is good for a lot of people. Well, apparently in my case, pretty much did not sit well with me. So to start off the day, I was engaging in weird things. It caused me to do weird things. I was experimenting with Ouija boards and using a deck of cards for tarot. You would think that those types of things would, be kind of a little abnormal for a person, but for me it was kind of normal. So I was just in my own home by myself. I lived by myself. I was kind of engaging in a little bit of the paranormal, occult type of fanatics. So reading up on astrology as well as engaging in type of rituals, candles. So it kind of took me to a different side, a different place. So I'm sitting in a dark apartment doing these weird occultic, weird things, and it's pretty cool. You're smoking marijuana, you're getting on the wild side. The next day I thought that, I was reading up online about opening your third eye and third eye chakras. You hear these things about people going through like spiritual awakenings. So I was looking up that type of stuff online, listening to binaural tones, going to bed with headphones, listening to frequencies and whatnot. It sounds a little weird, but I went to bed listening to this binaural tone that opens your third eye. And I woke up the next morning and I thought, my third eye was opened. This was the beginning of a whole episode of things that kind of it opened up a door to where it altered my perception, I believe. I was going on about my day. I was working in a manufacturing plant. I was a braze welder. Working, thinking my third eye was open and I was experiencing weird abnormal things. And so as my day went on, I've started, believing that there was a significant meaning to numbers. So I was looking up numerology. So all the numbers that I saw had a certain meaning to them. I was using playing deck cards as tarot cards and kind of still doing my little paranormal activity or paranormal things. As my days were going on, I believed that my third eye was open. I was, walking around, thinking that, okay, I'm super powerful. And then that's when the thought voice came along. So I started hearing this voice in my sleep, a thought voice type of, but it was like another person. So there was another person inside of my head telling me talking at me, telling me these weird things like electric company was polluting the environment, that there were witches in town. It was pretty weird. So I tried to go to sleep, and that night I had a dream that it was kind of like a vivid dream. I would have a lot of vivid dreams where this green monster was in the sky and it just came out from the top of my roof and was looking at me. So as all of this is going on, I'm perceptually, my real world is going fine, but inside I was still hearing this voice, and it just wouldn't get out of my head. And he was telling me that, I was going to die and that there was something out to get me, there were witches out to get me, and they were going to use me for some type of ritual. And so by that time I was kind of spooked, so I flushed whatever marijuana down the toilet, and after that I had stopped smoking the marijuana, but still I was still experiencing this weird presence in my home. And I lived by myself, so I was experiencing this weird presence in my home that kind of wouldn't go away. It's like this force that was in my room, sitting with me, watching me. So I tried to leave town. I got in my vehicle, was driving all over the place. But at that time I was seeing this force outside. It was like this dark cloud of force that was everywhere. It's like the negative energy that you see, or the negative energy that people talk about in the world, but it was actual energy itself. And it was all around, everywhere, all over the place. So the TV was talking at me like it was actually talking at me, to me. Weird things, weird coincidences were happening around me. I thought that the music the lyrics on the radio were talking at me. I was in belief that there was some presence around me. And I can hear this voice inside of my head telling me that I was going to die, that I wasn't going to make it, or that there were witches in town using me as a sacrifice, and that their base was at this park. I also believe that I was the second coming of Jesus Christ, only because my birthday fell 5 days before. So as all of this was happening, basically home life, living by myself, I was experiencing all this on my own. So there was really no one there to kind of help me with this. So I didn't understand what was going on. It was like my whole world turned upside down. With the whole thought voice, I got kind of freaked out. I thought of suicide a lot, ending my life. Lots of suicidal thoughts. At this point I was very sensitive to my environment and things that were happening around me. And so I was venturing out into plain fields in the middle of Kansas looking for areas that were polluted. Also, I was inspecting ponds, taking time off. Little did I know I was taking lots of time off from work. So I had missed a good 5 days of work. And so I was pretty much out there spending most of my days listening to binaural tones out in the middle of parks looking for pollution. And so by that time I had tried to get a grasp on what was happening to me, tried to say, oh, there's nothing wrong, but the voice wouldn't go away. And this negative energy, I ended up going to the psych ward. I spent a good week in there. So it was very interesting. It was like I was with my own people. I got to the point where I tried to leave town. I was in the car, I was at the edge of town, and I was listening to music on the radio, and it was pretty much felt like the lyrics were talking at me, and I was ready to leave town, and somehow I turned around and went and got help. But the interesting part of it is that after I got out, they prescribed me the medication to take. My father had came over after I'd gotten out of the hospital and decided to have a talk with me about taking the medication. So I don't recommend this to a lot of people out there, but in my case, it was a little different, but my father advised me not to take the medication. So I did, with the great risk of having the future issues with psychosis but I ended up experiencing the rest of my psychosis without the medication. It was a very hard thing to do, but I still went to psychotherapy so to kind of keep myself in line. But the experience of what happened next was a little different. So I did all of this on my own, pretty much. It was hard going back to work and having to pay bills. And when I went to work, the very interesting thing was the paranormal weird things kept happening to me. I would go to work, and any people out there experience this type of negative energy or negative feel out there. But I would go to work, and perceptually I was totally in a whole different world. What you see in modern day today, I was like in an alternate reality. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie Night Watch, but it's like they have this place called the Gloom. It was kind of like that. It was like an alternate reality, and you see it on television. But it's like a negative part or another part of reality that, some people out there do see alternate parts of reality. Perceptually, they really, really do. I would say that from experience. But I would go to work, I would sense this negative energy in this place, because this was a high-risk place where people are susceptible to getting hurt, cut, or even dying. I would sense or feel this negative energy around me, like this big ball of smoke type of big weird cloud of negative energy that's surrounding this whole entire factory. And I would go to work, and it was just sitting there, just waiting for someone to slip up and just kind of get hurt. So when people say there is negative energy out there, I do believe there is some type of negative force out there that's waiting for someone to get hurt. But after that, I had some very lucid, vivid dreams after getting out of the hospital and dealing with the psychosis without the medication. I would have vivid dreams of me flying, very real. I had a vivid dream about these beings. They came into my room, and they were like these spiritual beings of some kind, and they would upgrade, like I had an upgrade of some kind. And then so I started looking into that a little more, and what they say is a lot of people back in Indian tribes, like people who experience like psychotic episodes like psychosis, they would call them spiritual awakenings. So I kind of looked into that a bit, dwell into what happened, with me. So I looked a little bit into that, because I did think I was a little bit psychic as well when I was going through my little psychotic episode. But I looked into a lot of spiritual awakenings with psychosis. So I kind of thought my little psychotic episode, suffering through it, I still got up each day suffering the symptoms of suicidal thoughts. Every morning I got up every morning, and there wasn't a day when I thought about, offing myself. But I laugh about it now, but back then it was like I was in a whole nother place. I would say that mostly every day was kind of hectic, because I was very sensitive to my environment after that episode. So everything that happened around me, I was sensitive towards. Everything that I was feeling, I was more extreme to. But this negative force that was hanging around, looming over me day after day, it was like I had to find ways to kind of pick myself back up. So as I'm going into like the spiritual phase of things, so I was venturing into metaphysical, spiritual bookstores and places, getting amethyst, quartz for protection from this negative energy or this voice that was bothering me. I didn't feel safe unless I had these items with me, kind of dwelling into that occult / metaphysical, but in a metaphysical, spiritual way. So I kind of saw my situation as a spiritual awakening, and what I was going through was the dark night of the soul. And so just those types of things were on my mind then. I was going to weird functions like spiritual, metaphysical things, and then getting into, Hinduism and receiving weird information on those types of things. I've always been one of those that has dwelt in the metaphysical. So, and then I thought back to a couple of years ago, I would have these visions of me being in the crazy house and, going through something mental. And I never thought anything like that would ever happen. Anything to keep away the thought voice, the dark energy around. I was gathering up any type of information I could. Over time, it took a while for me to kind of get through that. After a while, the thought voice started fading. It took a good few months. I was in psychotherapy for a good 3 months after I got out of the hospital. At that time, I was kind of coming back. I was kind of realizing my own reality, but at the same time, I still thought that music was talking to me, the lyrics were talking at me, numbers still had a significance, so it took a good while for me to kind of come back to reality. But after a while, I was still emotionally unstable, but this presence or this energy that's around, I would have never thought that I would perceive or even see anything like that. I would never think or believe that anyone could experience anything paranormal. In my own opinion, growing up, I've never believed in anything like supernatural or paranormal. With my experience with psychosis and having to deal with seeing things from an alternate perspective, there are people out there that do view the world totally different from how I perceive it, so how anyone perceives it. And it kind of put me into that field of where I was thrown into another world without my own consent, kind of, but it kind of helped me realize that there are people out there that do see things, and how we experience things that happen to us is a lot different than how other people think, or see it as. So what I say to a lot of people out there, if someone has experienced something to any type of degree, that more than likely in their own eyes they're experiencing it. My name is Edgar Costilla, born and raised from Wichita, Kansas, right in the middle of the USA. This is my experience story. So for those out there who experience any type of mental health issues, please get help by a licensed professional if needed, and get help from a primary care physician of any kind. They'll be able to help you and diagnose any issues that you may have as well.